Evening. It is 6 o'clock on my watch, so we will start. I will call the Madison Board of Education to order, and we will start with the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You guys had to help, didn't you? You had the East.
May we have roll call, please?
Mrs. Melissa Walker.
Here.
Mrs. Cotterman.
Here.
Mr. Mosier.
Here.
Miss Amy Walker.
Here.
Mr. Wigton.
Here. I need a motion to adopt our agenda.
So moved.
I'll second.
Discussion. Roll call.
Mr. Mosier.
4.
Mrs. Melissa Walker.
4.
Mrs. Cotterman.
4.
Miss Walker.
4.
Mr. Wigton.
4. We need a motion to approve our previous board meeting minutes for April 19th.
So moved.
Is that Amy?
Yeah. And I'll second.
Discussion. Roll call.
Miss Amy Walker.
4.
Mrs. Melissa Walker.
4.
Mr. Mosier.
4.
Mrs. Cotterman.
4.
Mr. Wigton.
4. We have no certificates to present tonight. At this time, we'd like to recognize any visitors who might wish to address the board.
Hello, everybody. Obviously, I'm Sean Conway. I'm the principal of the high school, and I'd like to present Jaden Jeffries. Jaden is somebody I personally mentored as he became one of the greatest basketball players in school history. We focused on rebounding, boxing out, getting up there, wiping the glass. That's kind of what we did. So I'd like to personally take credit for Jaden's abilities out on the court.
Stand in line.
Yeah. I mean, he's done a lot on the court. He just can't beat me one-on-one. I know that. So anyway, in all seriousness, I do want to present Jaden to the board. Jaden is going to go down as one of the best basketball players to ever play here. Jaden was the first team all OCC selection, and he was the district player of the year. He was also named most valuable player. I think he was also the #1 draft pick for the News Journal All-Star Game. He scored 1,164 points in his 4 years, which ranks him 7th in the history of Madison boys basketball. His accomplishments have also earned him second team All-Ohio, and he will be attending Cuyahoga Community College in the fall. Very proud of Jaden, very proud of his accomplishments. He's done a lot for our basketball program. I know that Coach Rickert wanted to be here, but he is at the baseball game supporting our boys as they try to continue on their tournament run. But we are extremely proud of Jaden. He's done a lot for our program and a lot for Rams basketball. So just want to congratulate him on an awesome career and thank him for everything he's done for Ram Nation.
Good evening. Mrs. Von Stein and Mr. Thompson, please come on down. Our Skills USA chapter has always displayed the qualities in order to be recognized as a distinct chapter in the state of Ohio. However, for the first time in school history, our Skills USA chapter has earned silver level chapter of distinction. To put that in perspective, of the existing 124 Skills USA chapters in Ohio, we are the only chapter in the state to receive a silver rating. I would like to congratulate our students and their amazing advisors, Mr. Thompson and Mrs. Von Stein, for this accomplishment. Without their hard work and dedication, this would not have been able to be achieved. So tonight, I present them with their actual award here from the state of Ohio. So congratulations. Our last visitor this evening, this is Jersey Spielman. She is one of our national qualifiers. She will be competing in barbering. She will have the opportunity to go down to Atlanta, Georgia with Mrs. Von Stein, actually. They will be there for, I believe, an entire week is that right? And she will be competing and taking part in that awesome opportunity to compete at the national level. So just want to recognize her and her accomplishments and this awesome opportunity to continue to compete, represent herself and Madison at the national level. And best of luck. And the state of Ohio, yes. She does very well. She could potentially compete at internationals, depending on how well she does. So wishing her luck and congratulating her as well. So thank you.
Both great students, and that's an accomplishment for the Skills USA as well. Any other visitors? Okay. Committee reports. Legislative Committee?
No report.
No Athletic Board of Control this meeting. Student representative comments.
Hi, I hope everyone's having a good day. I'm going to start with sports today. So as they were talking about, we have a lot of tournament games today, and this week, getting into that. So track has district semifinals tomorrow and district finals on Saturday. Really high hopes for that. We just had people place, and we were actually regional runner-up recently. Softball were OCC champions, so they had a great season, a really awesome record. Baseball has their game tonight, as mentioned. It's their tournament game, so they're looking to continue through that. And boys tennis just finished. They had a really great season, and they really built their team up this year. The boys tennis team was starting to kind of fall down, and Coach Hill really brought that back up. So graduation is next week, and the last day for seniors is Friday, and everyone else is Wednesday. So we have everything involving that, rehearsal, senior breakfast. So that's really exciting. The band and choir had concerts the past couple weeks. Just getting able to get their last performance in for the year. It was really awesome. And as they mentioned, I was going to talk about Jersey Spielman and Skills USA, but that was already covered. So I'd like to introduce our new officers for the year, if they could come down.
Hi, my name is Courtney Cyrus. I'm a freshman. I'm going to be a sophomore next year, and I'm the vice president.
Hi, my name is Kendall Kirshner. I'm a junior, and I will be the president next year, and I have some big shoes to fill, but I'm excited to meet all of you.
Hi, I'm Drake Ramey. I'm the secretary. I'm going to be a junior next year. It's nice to be here.
Thank you.
So I know they're looking forward to next year, and I'm really thankful for this year, so thank you.
Thank you. Our facilities report.
Good evening. Briefly, just to go over a few things, the high school air conditioning project is going well, and actually they said that it will be completely installed by the end of this week, and then they'll go into the testing and startup phase to make sure that's ready to go for us when school begins next year. The elementary air conditioning projects are pretty much wrapped up except for the control package. We installed an interface so that we can control and see what's going on without being in the building, and that's being fine-tuned now. It's been a little bit difficult because we haven't had the consistently warm weather so the thing could run all the time, and we keep dipping down into the 50s and 40s at night, so it goes into a different mode, and then it takes to the middle of the day to really see it run, but we hope to get that dialed in very soon. At Madison South, they just finished are about to finish the fencing project around the playground, and that was done with safety grant money, and it's going to make a big difference for them and really increase the safety on the playground there at Madison South. And then last thing is the 3M, I don't want to call it's called a safety film. It's kind of a misnomer to say bulletproof, but it's an impact-resistant film that went into all the building entrance windows, and that's been installed, and the final thing with that is in about 2 weeks they'll come back in and do a wide band of caulking around it that will really make that all one solid piece, and that'll be done, and that will be a big improvement for the safety for the front of the schools. Other than that, we're just doing lots of setups and getting ready for the big setup, which is graduation. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Student achievement.
Okay, so at the Career Center, 2 out of 2 students passed the phlebotomy certification. 1 out of 1 passed the medical assisting certification. With welding, 3 out of 4 passed their certification tests. With the nail technician program, 3 out of 3 students graduated, passed state boards, and are working as nail technicians. 1 student achieved her high school diploma through the program. Cosmetology and advanced cosmetology showcased their talents in updos, nails, and makeup, and Mansfield's first BeautyCon show with area salons and schools. For spring enrollment, we have 13 new students in the STNA program, 9 in the phlebotomy program, 4 new students in the gas metal arc welding adult diploma, which brings it to 13 total in the 22-23 year. Nail technician, there are 6 new students. At the high school on May 2nd, the Academic Boosters Club hosted their teacher recognition program, so congrats to all of the outstanding students and teachers that were celebrated. The library recently found out that they are the recipients of a grant for $5,990.75 from the Snapdragon Book Foundation. Our grant, Modernize and Diversify the MCHS Library, was one of 15 selected winners from all over the country. Over 300 books will be able to be purchased. Last Friday was our spring PBIS recognition day. Students had the afternoon off and were able to play outdoor games and socialize. They had food trucks, so I'm not going to read them off, but I will post those on my page later. Summer school registration is now open. All students in need of credit recovery are encouraged to sign up for summer school. There are 3 different sessions for students to choose from, and they would like to congratulate Macy Sloniker for being recognized as MCHS's Rotary McGowan Courage Award winner. Macy was celebrated at a wonderful luncheon at the Mid-Ohio ESC. Special thanks to Mrs. Myers and Mr. Hathaway for nominating her. And then congrats to the NHS members on their outstanding achievement. They were celebrated in a recognition program on Wednesday, May 10th. For the middle school, the entire building completed the final iReady, ELA, and Math District Diagnostic for the school year this month to measure for this school year. 8th grade students who attended the 8th grade trip to Washington, D.C. did an excellent job representing our school and district. A wreath was placed at Arlington Cemetery at the Space Shuttle Challenger Memorial from our building and recorded in the Arlington Cemetery docket. Our academic challenge competed at their final academic challenge meet this month at Mid-Ohio Educational Service Center. Congratulations to our team who placed 13th out of 29. At Mifflin, students have been busy taking their end-of-year iReady diagnostics, both in reading and math. Students who meet their individual growth goals will earn a water party with the Mifflin Fire Department. Mifflin also recently hosted its annual literacy night that featured different activities from this year's book, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, with over 500 people in attendance. To end the year, students will be participating in the annual Mifflin Trivia Bowl, PBIS Incentive a Dog Show, Field Day, and an awards ceremony. And I imagine that Madison South and ECU were pretty wrapped up in end-of-year activities, so they did not report this time. They were busy.
Thank you. Board Policy Committee?
Yes, we met, and you could see later on in the agenda, there seems to be quite a lot of policies changing, but there really wasn't anything of great substance. A lot of like language changes and a lot of things change because of law. If anyone has any questions on those policies, I have the red line version. If anyone needs to see them, I have no problem sharing. And that's it.
Okay, thank you. Superintendent's update.
Well, we are down to the last week of school, 5 days left, except for seniors who are done. Their last day is Friday, so I know they're excited to go through graduation and get on with their careers. I'd just like to take a moment to thank everybody for a great school year, students, staff, parents and families. It was really nice to kind of get back to some normalcy, and I think we really had a great school year. Last night, and I know many of you were there, we had the Elementary Olympics, and that was a great night for kids of all ages. You know, we had the elementary kids competing, but we also had high school kids out there supporting them and doing different things with them. So it was just a really great night for the community and great to have the Olympics back. And really want to compliment Kyle Gordon. He's kind of the organizer of that, as well as the phys ed teachers and principals from the elementaries. They did a great job with that. Unfortunately, the levy didn't go the way we had hoped, so we are beginning planning for November. One of the important pieces of data that we're looking for we should have at the end of June, which would be the state funding for the upcoming 2 years. And we want to take a close look at that before we make any decisions on millage for November. And one of the things one of the issues that we have heard from the community is, I think several of them voted no as a result of it being a continuing levy. So I think we really need to consider a 5-year renewal in November. And once we have the state funding numbers, then we can do some simulations as we did last time to determine the millage needed to get us on good footing financially. So we'll probably do some work sessions as we did last time in preparation for putting the levy on the ballot. I think August 9th, we have to have that to the Board of Elections in order to be on the ballot in November. As a result of the levy not passing and some forecasting items that Mr. Stevens will address in his 5-year forecast, we did not anticipate initially having to make some expenditure cuts going into next school year, but we are going to have to do that. So Mr. Stevens and I will be sitting down and taking a look at some things, some expenditures that we'll have to cut back on going into next school year. So that process is beginning this week. So that is all I have at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Presentations. Lisa's going to go first.
I am. Good evening. You have, I think I emailed you on Friday, but I also gave you an updated one, a couple little tweaks to it, not too much. So there are 4 sections to what I do here in the district and what has happened this year. A lot of folks have gone through some of the pieces, so I'm definitely not going to read all this to you. But the first section just has to do with testing. We have our state mandated testing, we have district testing. And with all testing, what we're just trying to do is find out where are students performing at a certain point in time, and then what do we need to do from there? Do we need to adjust instruction up? Do we need to put some interventions in so that we can close gaps in subgroups, or we can just make sure that students are achieving where they need to be achieving for their grade level? We have many different assessments on that list there. Second piece has to do with Title I. We have 8 Title I teachers in the district, and they serve many, many students. They have them in small groups and see them throughout the course of the day. Kids move in and move out. It's a rather fluid way of working with students. But those teachers are phenomenal. They spend a lot of time in professional development, learning the intensive pieces of reading so that they can work with the students who need that. And it's a fast-paced, never-ending in and out of kids and getting them up to where they need to be, to grade level. Part of Title is also spending dollars in parent engagement, and this year, and some last year, and definitely this year a little bit more, our Title teachers have merged with our One Book, One School programs at the elementaries. And so not all of them, but 2 out of 3 of them have put their evening title programs with parents on the same night, or merge that with the One Book, One School. Since it's all literacy, it all works together, and that's an opportunity for them to see more parents than if they were just to have a title evening. And that has gone very, very well. The next page, federal programs. Federal programs is involved. The first part is just district leadership team. Our district leadership team spends a lot of time looking, especially in the fall, looking at building and district data. When we get the local report card results coming in, we dissect those with a fine-tooth comb. And then from that information and the time that the district leadership team spends looking at that data, then they go back to their building leadership teams and ultimately to their teacher-based teams. What do we need to do to close our subgroup gaps and make improvements in our districts? And so there are the main themes that we did in our 3 meetings that we had this year. There's different grants that go along with federal programs. We have 6 consolidated grants. Our Title I dollars go to support our Title I service and teachers. The majority of that goes for salaries for our title teachers, and then the support for those teachers in the classroom. The Title II dollars are spent majority on professional development and also on a teacher that we use as classroom reduction so that our classrooms are not so large. We spent a lot of our professional development dollars this year on literacy, the foundations program, and just making sure that teachers have a good grasp, the ones that need to use that for our intervention pieces. Our Title IV dollars, the breakdown is there. Once again, a lot of planning, a lot of professional development. We can use a little bit of that for technology, but for the most part, that has to fall under the category of well-rounded education and safe and healthy schools. Our IDEA-B and our IDEA-B early childhood, that's money that we receive for special education. A good amount of that is used for salaries and benefits for our special education aides and parapros and intervention specialists, and some of our purchase services like speech pathologists. And then our early childhood dollars, that's used for our Early Childhood Learning Center, Natasha's program. So our federal grants, this year, what we did is we received the chunk that we had not spent yet out of our ESSER dollars. And so we had to put together a whole new plan for that amount of money that we had received. And I have to tell you, this is a wonderful district to work with when it comes to organizing dollars, because we have phenomenal principals, the Treasurer's Department, curriculum. When we need to sit down and say, here's our chunk of money, what are our needs? The technology department, Steve, what are our needs? And for ESSER dollars, everything had to work around mitigating COVID or safety. So they had to meet those kind of parameters. You can stretch that, but it still has to be able to prove that COVID was involved and safety of students and teaching and staff. And so that organization can't be done with all of those different people and parts, and we spent a lot of meetings getting those dollars organized and how we wanted to spend them. And as Steve said, a lot of it went into air quality, a lot of it went into safety and getting our buildings up to par. Our ARP IDEA, that's once again American Rescue Plan, that money was used for very specific needs for our special ed students. We had some very intense special needs students this year who needed various things. We got some homeless dollars. We also got, we have a grant called a Stronger Connections grant, and that also was a safety grant. And so one of the things that we purchased there were 7 evacuation chairs. And I remember seeing Worcester City had gotten these. I read it in the newspaper. And they're a kind of chair that you can, it doesn't have a motor to it, but one person can actually put a full-size adult in the chair and get that down the steps. So if we have a student on a second floor who needs to get down for an emergency evacuation, of course, once those doors or the alarms go off, the elevators don't work. So you have to get wheelchairs down there, or you have to get a student down there, or maybe even an adult who freezes or panics or whatever, and you have to move them out. Then we have some for each one of the buildings except for Mifflin, because it's all on one floor. So that was a nice thing. Our safety grants, we got a lot of money in safety grants this year, and talked a little bit already about how they're spent, and it's also itemized on your sheet. But a lot of cameras. As you know, our country needs a lot of cameras in their schools these days for safety purposes, and we've been able to fulfill that need with these safety grants here. We have had 4 formal complaints in Title IV this year, which are sad, but it's just what has to be done, and they have been resolved. Our gifted students, the testing is already there. We serve our gifted students using a cluster model, so we try and use as many, or cluster our students into classrooms, so that you don't have one student here and one student there and 14 kids here. But they have to be served in the areas in which they're identified. So if they've been identified in reading, then you're going to have groups of students who've been identified with teachers who have been receiving professional development on how to differentiate their curriculum in order to serve those students. And so that's gone very well. The bulleted list there, those are the number of students identified in those particular areas. And then the chart to the right is how many gifted students we have per grade level. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I also provided you with a packet tonight just to talk about a few highlights and things that I've been involved in throughout the school year. The first being the Madison Online Academy. We have decided to continue this. We limited it this year to grades 9 through 12, and we only had 16 students that participated in that online academy. We have opened it again for the 23-24 school year, again for just the 9th through 12th graders. And at this time, there's only 3 that have applied. We have kept the qualifications and parameters the same. They have to meet attendance and grade guidelines to qualify for that. So we'll see how that continues. It's open till June 3rd. Professional development, we have contracted with Mid-Ohio Educational Service Center. They help us with our literacy and math. We contracted mainly too because we had to deliver professional development to all our K and 1 teachers for the dyslexia requirements coming out. So all of our kindergarten and first grade teachers did complete their 18 hours of compliance for professional development. Next year we'll move into grades 2 and 3 for that, and after that it's 4 through 12 all intervention specialists, no matter what content area they're in. So we do have a plan in place for that to get everyone their training. Our August PD focused mainly around safety. Again, we talked about all the safety grants. We did Stop the Bleed training. Every staff member, classified or certified, to get trained in Stop the Bleed. We did full-scale safety drills in each of our buildings, which was a little different last time. We did just one here and had shots fired and things like that, so they knew what that sounded like. We felt it was important to do that in each of the buildings because it is so different in every building. October and February, we continued with our dyslexia training. We also offered some CPR certification, gifted professional development, and just had some building-specific needs that were addressed in those PDs. Moving on to curriculum and instruction. Right now, we're really focusing on the science of reading and getting all of our curriculum up to par with that. And that comes a lot from these dyslexia standards and guidelines that are being put in place by the state. So what I have done for you, just to give you a little bit of background on the science of reading, in your packet, I have included just some things that go along with the science of reading. The first is Scarborough's reading rope. It talks about language comprehension, all the aspects that go into language comprehension, and also word recognition, and how those are weaved together to get a skilled reader. And I provided you a lot more in-depth information in the email, so I didn't want to get too deep into this because this could take, honestly, hours, and our teachers have all been through this. Another big thing in the science of reading is what is called the simple view of reading, and what that is it's a formula. It's taking word recognition and language comprehension and making it a multiplication problem, and basically it's telling you if you cannot read words, You do not have good word recognition, but maybe you're strong in language comprehension, that still does not equal a proficient reader. So you have to have both aspects of that. So that is another big part of the science of reading, is that what they call that simple view of reading. And then what we've really focused on is that Appendix F. And that comes from Ohio's plan to raise literacy achievement. And you'll see it has the grade levels at the top and what they call the Big Five on the right side. And the orange is what the focus areas are. So for phonemic awareness, we've focused on that in kindergarten and first. And honestly, we started a program called Heggerty about 4 years ago, before all of this even started, to really get ahead of the game. And that's been a really big game changer for us in our elementary. And then we've brought in the foundations. And this was our first year of implementing that in kindergarten and first grade. Very successful. We've seen great growth with our students. And then building out in second, third, and fourth the literature we already have to encompass vocabulary, comprehension, using the great resources we already have, but just building those out to really focus on those areas. So, and the last page I have for you is just a graphic organizer of the Big Five and what they are, why they're important. These are just a lot of the resources we've used to help align our curriculum with the science of reading. So just to continue on, this coming year, we're implementing grade 2 foundations. All the second grade teachers have been trained already. We are also continuing with grades K through 5, Writing Revolution, which is a content writing program. And as you can see, many other things there that are bulleted. We're just continuing to follow that plan to raise literacy achievement for Ohio. And then just some other things to point out. I completed 46 interviews of non-bachelor substitutes. So we hired 46 substitutes that were non-bachelors. And hopefully that's going to continue. Mid-Ohio is been gracious enough to drop their application fee for these people. So they will just need to continue to go back out and get their license on ODE's website. So it looks like that's going to continue again for next year. And just the continuous monitoring of the dyslexia standards, all the PD requirements that are coming down, and we're preparing in the fall to test all first through third graders with a dyslexia screener. And there's a lot that goes into that, and notifying the parents. And if they do, we're not diagnosing, but if they are showing indicators, there's steps we need to follow, progress monitoring, and everything like that. So lots going on, and it's been a great school year. So thank you.
Thank you.
Busy.
Yeah.
The amount of training that teachers have had has been overwhelming, probably, for them. Thank you. We have no donations to approve, so we need a motion to accept the treasurer's report.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion?
All right, well, first thing on the treasurer's report is a monthly financial report. If you look at the revenues, we received more than we brought in April, but that's because of timing. We got the final settlement for our real estate in April, which we got it in March the year before, so that's why you'll just notice that large jump in the month comparison from last April. The one thing I wanted to point out that's on this page is the true days of cash. That's on the report all the time, but the reason I wanted to point it out, the target's 60 days. Right now we're at 32. That's 20 days less than we were at this time last year, and a little bit less than half, a little bit more than half of what it was 2 years ago. So I know that you guys have heard this over and over again about spending more than we're bringing in. the true days of cash is a result of, living off of your savings. So it's going down to the point where, at this point in time next year, if things don't change, we won't have any days of cash left. So that's not a good thing. Talk about expenditures a little bit. Expenditures and salaries were up, which is expected, but they were a little bit higher a percentage than what was expected, and that's because of substitute teachers. I'll talk about that a little bit in the forecast, why it is higher, but the percentage and increase in salaries is a little bit higher. ESSER funds that you heard Mrs. Gonzalez talk about, those we used as much as we could to, in the allowable categories, to offset and reclassify. But those things are running out. Those funds are not going to be here after next year. So anything we spent those funds on to reclassify has to come back into the general fund. That's one of the reasons the forecast looks the way it does, because we have spent that money and for what it was intended to be used for. But when that money runs out, those programs are going to have to come out of general fund. The next page is the same page you guys always get with general fund ending cash balance. It's a bar graph. The top line graph basically tells when we're going to be out of money. And the last page is the same with regards to our expenditures per pupil. Next thing I want to go through is the 5-year forecast. So, before I start, I want you to think about the 5-year forecast. I would like to talk about it as I'm painting a picture, okay? My job is to paint the picture as clear as I can. So if I paint a picture as clear as I can of a tree in the middle of the road, that's for you guys to see. There's a tree in the road. I better figure out what I'm doing, and I'm part of that team too. My job is to make sure that tree is painted clearly in the middle of the road. If I paint it off to the side of the road, that's a problem. So that's the way I kind of want you to look at the forecast, and that is that analogy. So as Mr. Peterson had pointed out, there are a few differences in this forecast that they were in November. Since November, we have had to go through that precautionary written plan that happened in February. There was some small percentage changes, but those small percentage changes actually equate to large numbers. So I want you to think about something. When we're talking about $33 million in revenues, my goal is to always be less than 3% off. 1% of $33 million is $330,000. That's a lot of money. So if I'm 3% off, that's $1 million. I wasn't 3% off, but even at 1%, that's a huge number. And it's $35 million in expenditures. So 1% is $350,000. And that's a substantial amount of money. So the positive news is I'm pretty accurate. The negative news is, even though I'm pretty accurate, those are large dollars. So this plan is, like I said, different because it reflects all the changes that we put in the February precautionary written plan. So revenues, I've talked about this before. 90% of our revenues comes from taxes and foundation. One of the big misconceptions that was heard with the levy, property valuation is going to go up, so we're going to get a lot more money. We won't. We're not at the 20 mil floor. The way taxes go are on millage and House Bill 920, which is from 1976. As valuation goes up, millage rate goes down. The only thing we collect more money on is inside millage, which is voted, or which is unvoted, and nobody can control that, and new construction. But if you have an existing house and your valuation went up, that means the millage rate went down. It's not that we're going to collect a lot more money. Now, if you were in my previous district, we were at the 20 mil floor, so it did mean more money, but Madison is not. The changes on the revenues are also a result of the precautionary plan that we talked about in February, because some of the funding that comes from the state foundation is directly tied to operations, And if you change operations, that will alter the amount the state reimburses or says you are entitled to. So some of those revenue changes were based on that February precautionary written area plan. So when I said I wasn't that far off, I really wasn't. In revenues, 0.77% so far. So within 1% of what I thought we were going to get in November, and what I presented, we're there. The bad news is it's 1% in the opposite way. I thought we were going to get almost $260,000 more than what we got. That is because I didn't know what the delinquency rate was going to be until April when we got our final real estate settlement. So last month.
So people not paying their taxes has caused us
Correct.
to be less money.
Correct. So for example, historically, I've gone on historical trends, and historically, Madison has been pretty close to 100%, in the 99 to 100% range. This year, this time, it happened to be in the 97% range. So around 3% off. At $10 million of a revenue stream, 1% is $100,000. So by missing that target by a couple percent, that shot our property tax collections by $300,000. Now, we'll get that back because people have to pay the taxes, but we're not going to get it all back in one shot. It'll trickle in. So, and I've already built this into the forecast, but what that means is maybe the next time the collection rate's a little bit over 100% instead of, it might be 100.1 or 0.2. But it just depends on when those delinquencies are paid. But you are correct, Mr. Wigton. It's delinquencies of taxes that I had based on historical trends, and I missed it by just a couple percent. Not much. I didn't miss it by 10% or 5%, but you miss it by a little bit, and those large amounts of numbers, it affects you, and it went negative. So we collected less revenue than what I anticipated. Next thing we want to talk a little bit about is expenditures. Of $30 million, or $30 million of the 36 that we're spending is on salaries and benefits. I mean, it's 85% of our budget. So that is a huge thing. So when we talk about cuts, unfortunately, it is going to have to impact that, as well as supplies and materials and everything else. There are several significant changes that I've put into expenditures, and those are based on that precautionary written plan, and also based on, I know that we are going to go from caution to either, well, probably be in watch in November if things don't turn around. But even if things do turn around, we're still going to be in, if we don't pass a levy in November, even if the state revenue comes in our favor, we're still going to be in trouble. We have to make some cuts. So the levy passage is imperative. So I talked a little bit about being off. I was right now 1.27% from what I thought our expenditures were going to be in November. So I was about a little bit over 98% accurate. But 1.27% of $36 million happens to be $452,000. So if you take the $300,000 that I was low in revenues and in predicting it, and the $452,000 that I was low in predicting how much our expenditures are, that adds up to a $700,000 swing. So was I off by a lot percentage-wise? No, but that adds up to a pretty big number. Unfortunately, I can't be 100% because I can't predict delinquency rates. I can't predict exactly how many substitutes we're going to have, which, I'll explain why that was a variation this year from what I anticipated in February in a minute. I'm just going to mention that precautionary written plan again because that is a significant impact on our expenditures. So the first thing I'm going to talk about salaries. One of the major changes in this from November is when I forecasted in November, I kept the steps in. I put the base increase as 0 for negotiations, but I kept steps in. Now, I took the steps out, which basically says after this contract's up, it's wage freeze. I hadn't anticipated complete wage freeze. I'd put in steps because that's what I anticipated the district getting. But this time around, because we're in such financial trouble, I didn't put that in. So 0% increase on all salaries after the 23-24 school year. The implemented precautionary written plan offsets some of the ESSER funds. That money that we had talked about offsetting in fiscal year 24, I offset some of it this year instead of next year because the way things work, they compound. So it was more beneficial for us to use that this year to offset the funds than next year, because time value of money, $1 today is worth more than $1 tomorrow because of interest and compounding salary schedules and everything else. One of the ESSER parts that I did move is there's a thing we call recruitment and retention, which has to do with salaries. That's where that big shift came. This is really hard to see up there, I'm sorry. Benefits. The benefits are tied to salaries. So as the salaries change, the benefits change. So wages, one of the things in that precautionary written plan were cuts. So in FY25, those cuts not only affected salaries, they're going to affect the wages, so that showed a little bit better in FY25, but the increase in salaries this year increased the benefits. And I'm going to go back a little bit. Salaries, one of the reasons the salaries were off, I said, was substitutes. Well, when I look at a forecast, what I do is I look at historical trends. I've taken the last 7 years what was spent on substitutes. I've taken the last 7 years on what was spent on professional development. And I've got a spreadsheet with, 8 different tabs, 30 different lines for each one. And I go through year by year and look at the trends. So I looked at the 7-year average and added, I took the highs and lows and I added a decent percent to it. Well, there were certain things that happened this year, like, for example, we had 5 substitutes in the middle school that for teachers we didn't have, so we had to have a long-term sub. Well, that added to the substitute teacher cost. That, wasn't put in here. When they opened up for non-bachelor's people to be able to be subs, I found out after the fact, Mr. Peterson and I were discussing, because I went to him, I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? He shared with me that last year there were classes that, didn't have substitute teachers, quite a few classes that didn't have substitute teachers. We didn't have that problem this year. When teachers were absent, there was a sub to fill them. So those are the sort of things that 7-year historical trend didn't show. So
plus we had to increase this.
We did have to increase
fee too, because we couldn't get subs.
That is completely accurate. You're completely accurate. But those are the things that aren't reflected in that 7-year history that I use as a base of how to build an increase in. So now that I've been here a year, I know that, hey, I can't use that 7-year average for substitutes now. So that going forward will be a way that I adjust how I forecast things like that. I went over benefits. Purchase services. Before I go on to purchase services, I need to explain this is a very difficult area to cut things in, and here's why. Electricity is a purchase service. Now, that being said, I have contacted a different consortium, and I'm looking to, with the board's permission, switch. I was talking to Mr. Wigton, and Mr. Peterson and I have discussed. Right now we're with a thing called Ohio Schools Council, which is through OSBA, and that consortium has a way of going out and bidding electricity. There's another consortium that I've had experience with called META, it used to be Metropolitan Education Council. They're quite large, and they do their bidding a little bit different. What I had done is I had sent all our electric bills to this Metropolitan Education Council and a copy of the contract that Ohio Schools Council sent us and asked us to sign. And he came back and said, you know, I think I can save you about $24,000 a year if you switch. So when it comes time to sign the contract, you know, I'm going to approach the board and say, hey, you care if I switch consortiums? So, but that being said, we can't cut electricity. We can't shut the lights off. Now, you know, Mr. Christ and I have discussed quite a bit cost-saving measures. We're going to change the air conditioning level in the summer, so that'll save some money. You know, Mr. Peterson, I apologize. Mr. McVicker and I have talked a lot about different things with printers and copiers. We're looking at areas to save money. Insurance, I have contacted another company to go out for bid to see if I can get us a better deal on our property and fleet insurance. Now that, when that comes time, it's going to be a discussion with the board, because it might be a different amount of liability. Instead of $15 million, it might be $13 million. But that's going to be a discussion I'm going to have with the board, with you, once I get that back. So there are things that we're looking at, but I can't not have insurance. We can't not have electricity. We can't not have water. A lot of the services that are provided for students on IEPs, we're legally bound to have those therapies. We can't not do those. So purchase services, you know, even though they're 11% of our budget, it's quite difficult to cut in those areas. We can do the best we can to reduce, and I've given you a few examples of how we are looking at trying to reduce them, but those are areas that are, we're doing the best we can. It's just not easy to eliminate. Same way with supplies. What we're going to do this year is we're going to reduce the building budgets. That's going to help. But we're actually pretty much bare bones as it is anyway. We spend right around 2% of our budget on supplies. So when you think about serving, you know, 2,700 kids or something like that, it's kind of hard to cut out paper. I mean, we can reduce it as much as we can, but there's just things that we have to go do business. Capital outlay. There's less than 1% of our budget spent on capital outlay, which is equipment and purchases, but I want you to know there's 21 bus routes. So that means if we only replace one bus a year, our oldest bus is 21 years old by the time it gets replaced. Now, imagine a 21-year-old vehicle that's driven 15,000 miles a year and stop and go, driven in the winter primarily when there's salt and grime and everything else in the road, not in the summer. How can we cut? You know, I've eliminated a bus purchase from this, because I did have a bus purchase built into the forecast in November, but I've taken it out. So the next 5 years, there's no purchase of buses because we don't have the money to do it. We have heating and cooling in some of our buildings that are over 20 years old. Some of them we can't even get parts for anymore. So we're at a dire need to replace some boilers. You know, those are things you have to have in order to get the kids in school. So, and though I'd love to cut, you know, $300,000 out of the budget by not having capital outlay, that's really not feasible, because we're already pretty bare bones. The district has done a very good job at making things squeak by with as little expense as we can. So that leads me to my last slide on wrap-up. So I'm legally not allowed to certify any kind of a contract that's more than for 2 years if we don't have a positive fund balance, or it's going to cost me personally $10,000. So I'm not going to do that, which means next year when our copier lease is up, I can't sign a new copier lease. Next year when I'm negotiating contracts, I can't sign a 3-year contract with no money. We're not in really good shape. And this year, like I said, we were required by ODE to submit that precautionary written plan, and I put those cuts in this forecast, and we're not doing much better, so we're going to be on the next level, most likely, come November, unless a levy passes. So it's, and those are levels of financial distress, and just so you know, it's caution, watch, and an emergency. All right, I apologize for not good news, but before I move on, because I do have more to go, does anybody have any questions? Okay. The next thing on this is approval of a transfer, $20,000 to permanent improvement and $25,000 for adult ed. Normally it's a $10,000 transfer for permanent improvement, but last May when I was here, my first month, I didn't know that was even a thing. I discovered it after I'd been here a couple months that this district always puts $10,000 back to replace the turf when it comes time to do that. So rather than do two $10,000 increments and risk getting them mixed up and say, oh, we did it already and not do it again, I figured I'd do one shot at 20 to cover last year's and this year's. And the $25,000 for adult ed is something that is done every year. So before I end my report, I'd like to entertain questions. No?
Community's going to have to choose what kind of school district they want.
I think everybody up here has a very good understanding of where we are. I think I've been clear. I think where the failure or disconnect has come is the explanation to those out, the public and other staff members, how dire we are. But that being said, as Mr. Peterson pointed out, we have some discussion, and our approach is one of the parts of the discussion we're going to have to talk about with the levy, because we're going to have to make sure that this message is conveyed clearly to everybody. So I would agree with you, Mr. Wickman.
And the misinformation that comes through social media doesn't help either. And there was tons of it, and it was some of it the most bizarre stuff you can ever imagine. Mm-hmm. Apparently we're building a new high school next year. I didn't know that, but that was one of the things.
I'm not aware of that either, so.
Yeah, that was interesting. And that we have $6 million just lying around in grants that we can just spend for whatever we want to spend it on. And that's probably news to the federal government. I'm sorry. I'm a little bitter about that, but I'll move on.
Can I do roll call for mine?
Yeah, I think we're ready for roll call. Thank you.
Mrs. Melissa Walker?
4.
Mr. Mosier?
4.
Mrs. Connerman?
4.
Miss Amy Walker?
4.
Mr. Wigton?
4. And thank you, Brad, for a very thorough report.
You're welcome.
Strategic plan.
And ironically, it's the turn of the action plan team with financial responsibility to go tonight. So we'll move on to that now. Brad and I are the co-chairs of that committee, and we'll be splitting this report up, starting with strategy number 1, which discusses a lot of the transparency pieces, and we just saw Mr. Stevens at work with respect to that. And so I'll turn it over to him at this time to address strategy 1 of our financial responsibility goal.
Okay. On transparency, the first action step was to closely monitor the district's general fund and to maintain a reserve of 60 days. That is our goal, is 60 days. The report that I give you guys each month does track in 3 different ways the cash on hand. The one is the chart that's in the revenues, and the other 2, one's a bar graph and one's a line graph on next to the back page. So I'm transparent with that. I'm transparent with the forecast and where we're at on there. In addition, I want to point out that, in the last year, I think I've changed that board report 4 or 5 times because when I get suggestions from you all or the administration or somebody that says, hey, this is information that I think is relevant, or maybe something does come out from ODE that is relevant, I try to put that in. This is, it's not a static thing, it's dynamic, so it will change as things occur. But that transparency part, I put those out there, I give you guys reports. The second one is seeking cost-saving measures on expenditures. I'm just going to give you a couple examples. First, I'm going to give Mr. McVicker and Mr. Christ a lot of kudos. Mr. McVicker has worked tirelessly with specifically photocopiers, and he's worked with our security, thinking outside the box of ways that we can save money, do things more efficiently, and that is something we do. He does. I can't tell you how many meetings we've had, but he has been very, very diligent at that. Mr. Christ, I almost feel bad for him because he seems like he gets beat up a lot by the vendors, because I am continually on him to say, hey, can we get a better price? Where can we save money? And I get carbon copied on a lot of emails, and he is like a dog with a bone when it comes to saving money, and I have to thank him for that. I had mentioned to you a little earlier about trying to switch consortiums for our electric. It just so happens I don't remember, I think it was December, I signed Madison up for this program called TIPS, and the night lock systems, which is a safety thing for the safety grant that Mr. Christ talked about, I was able to save us $12,000 by just, I saw the person and I saw the little TIPS thing and I just hit them up, and within a day they gave us a new quote, $12,000 less. So we are all doing our absolute best to look for cost-saving measures and thinking outside the box to try to figure out ways to do things better. And that's not saying that Madison has done things poorly. It's just saying that, we're at the point where, it's almost so critical that it's even the cheapest isn't going to be able to cut it. Maintain a level of staffing that meets the students' needs as well as student enrollment. I know that Mr. Peterson, I don't know if you'd like to talk about this or not, but I know he's mentioned to you that, we've cut staff over the last 20 years. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, or do you want me to keep going, Mr. Peterson?
I think the only thing that I'll say about that is we've cut and we've cut and we've cut, and we're to the point now where, there's cost of doing business, of educating kids, and when we continue to make cuts, instead of increasing revenue, we're hurting the education of our kids, and we need to get to the point where we increase the revenue so we can maintain the staff that we have instead of having to continue to make cuts.
And number 4, continue to focus the spending on classroom instruction. There's a part in that report that I have gone over. I spent quite a bit of time on last board meeting saying, here's where it shows reports from ODE. We are spending it on instruction. We're not spending it on administration. We're not spending it on, supports. We're spending it on instruction. And the last one, make the forecast available on the website. This is all me. I do it. The forecast's on there. The monthly reports are on there. They might not get on the same time every month, but they're updated every month. When I get them, when I send them to you, and I apologize, you guys don't get them all the exact same day every month because it depends on how things are going in my office. But typically when I send them to you, then I upload them, the monthly reports, to the website. And then, like the forecast, I didn't put it on the website until I had sent it to you first. So that's all me, and that's been done. The next thing, evidence of success. Simply put, transparency indicators are met as the board and community are being updated monthly with respect to our finances, and reports are available on the website. Unfortunately, the 60-day cash balance indicator isn't met and requires a significant increase in revenue to meet it. Specifically, passage of a levy for new operating money. There's going to be no way to preserve the district's current programming if the levy doesn't pass in November. Unfortunately, I mean, we're going to have to make cuts, but as Mr. Peterson said, we won't be able to cut our way out of this deficit. So I will turn over the next section, which is Mr. Peterson's, that assuring that the revenue sources provide diverse opportunities.
So the second strategy revolves around increasing revenue, and that's not easy for school districts to do, but very clearly as part of our strategic plan, we need to increase the revenue coming into the district so that we can maintain what we have. And I think what we have is very much quality, but it takes funding to maintain that. So our first action step was to generate additional local tax revenue through the passage of the May levy. Obviously, I think we all know that did not turn out the way we had hoped, so we're in the process of revising what will be on the ballot in November. Secondly, to aggressively pursue grants and other alternative revenue sources. You heard from Mrs. Gonzalez. She talked about the many grants that we have applied for. Specifically, in recent years, safety grants have been available, and we have applied for multiple, received multiple safety grants, and are using those funds to increase the safety of our buildings in our district. And then most recently, the Career Tech Expansion Grant, we have applied for that, and we have made it very clear in the planning for that and in our application to the state that we have absolutely no funding outside of what we would receive in the grant to add to that expansion. So everybody who was involved in that, there were several of us that worked on that. Mr. Grove specifically submitted the application, but we worked together to ensure that if we receive the grant, that grant will fully fund the expansion. Increasing student enrollment. I looked at our figures, year-end figures, and compared last year to this year, and we're actually down about 13 students, 23 students from last year. So we did not meet that goal. But I also, we are in the process of collecting open enrollment applications during the month of May, and last year we received 26 new open enrollment applications, and with 2.5 weeks left in the open enrollment period this year, before the end of May, those applications need to be in, but we already have received 34 applications this year, which is 8 more than last year, with over 2 weeks left to accept applications. And then the last action step is to communicate with state legislators regarding our state funding needs and concerns, and we have met, we have attempted to meet with Senator Romanchuk. We did meet with him once. We've attempted to meet with him a couple times, and we've also submitted written testimony on certain items at the state level. So this is a big piece of the picture. It's very difficult to implement our strategic plan fully, as we had hoped to do, without the funds to do so.
Okay, is that it? Yes. Okay, thank you for that. I need a motion to accept item L,
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
Discussion?
Have a few retirees that are in this item that I'd like to recognize. We have 3 employees retiring, 1 teacher and 2 non-teachers. First one is teacher Maggie Washington. She is currently a social studies teacher at the high school, and she's retiring with 34 years in the district. So I want to congratulate Maggie on her retirement. She's done a great job over her 34 years. And then next is Barb Williams, who is currently the head cook at Eastview, and she is also retiring with 34 years in food service in the Madison district, and she's done a great job, and want to congratulate her in her retirement. And then lastly, Kim Swank, who is a aide in our preschool program over at South, retiring with 23 years in the Madison district. So just want to congratulate all 3 of those employees and congratulate them on a great job and wish them well in their retirement.
Okay, roll call, please.
Mrs. Melissa Walker.
4.
Miss Amy Walker.
4.
Mr. Mosier.
4.
Mrs. Cotterman.
4.
Mr. Wigton.
4 with the exception of Melissa Wigton. It's not because I don't like her, but I can't vote for a relative.
Abstain on Miss Wigton.
Okay, that takes us to item M, superintendent's business. I need a motion to accept that.
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
Discussion.
Just like to comment on items 5, 6, and 7, as those are pretty substantial expenditures, and just want to be very clear about those. Number 5 is resurfacing the tennis courts, and that is not something that we would normally do, especially in the financial situation that we're in. However, those courts have become a safety concern, and our tennis teams play on those courts, and they cannot continue to play safely on those. So that is a safety issue, and with respect to that, there are some things maintenance-wise that we won't be able to do that we would normally do because we're spending those funds on a safety concern such as that. And then item 6, those are night lock security devices, and what I really just want to point out there is that we're using safety grant funds to pay for that. That is not a general fund expenditure. And what those are is they are reinforcement devices that will help keep doors, even when locked, from being opened by an intruder. So it's extra reinforcement from inside the classroom. And those will be installed into all of our classrooms as an extra safety device. And then number 7, again, this was very similar to number 5. In order for us to pass inspection of our football bleachers, this was the minimum update that we had to do and maintenance on those. So, we are very mindful of the cost of that, but in order to pass an inspection and be able to have home football games or home soccer games there, that absolutely had to be done. And again, we'll have to cut back in some other areas maintenance-wise because we're doing that. So just wanted to share with you those points with respect to those expenditures.
Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Mosier.
4.
Miss Amy Walker,
It was me.
Oh, it was you? Okay. Mrs. Melissa Walker.
4.
Mrs. Cotterman.
4.
Miss Amy Walker.
4.
Mr. Wigton.
4. Item N, any visitors who would like to address any issue before the board? Okay. Our next regular meeting has been changed to the last Wednesday in June, so that I want everyone to be aware of that. With that, I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Roll call.
Discussion? Roll call.
Mrs. Melissa Walker?
4.
Mr. Mosier? 4. Mrs. Cotterman?
4.
Miss Amy Walker?
4.
Mr. Rickton?
4. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming, sticking through.